Hello and greetings from all around the world. Welcome to AzerNews. We have a special guest visiting us from United Kingdom, is political scientist Mr. Neil Watson. Mr. Neil Watson, welcome to our show.
Well, Akbar, thank you very much indeed for inviting me to appear on AzerNews today.
Thank you so much as well for joining us. Now, of course, we're here to talk about the current political situations going around the world. Of course, since the beginning of this year, 2024, we have been observing lots of political changes, including such as parliamentary elections and presidential elections all around the world. And as we close the year, we have lots of other important things coming up until the end of the year. Now, I have lots of questions right now. I'm going to start with Armenia's latest decision on the defense spending. Now, during his speech discussing the country's 2025 state budget in Parliament, Armenian Prime Minister Pashinyan outlined the concepts of underlying the main financial document of the country. That also includes defense spending. During the discussion, it was announced that the defense spending in Armenia will increase by 20% in 2025. In contrary, Azerbaijan will reduce defense and security spending by about 7% in the upcoming year. So my question is, is Armenia bracing for a new conflict with Azerbaijan by boosting its defense?
Well, it's a very good question at this current moment in time. I mean, it's quite extraordinary that a country that is seemingly seeking a peace deal and has been for an awfully long, protracted time now, is actually got a budget for $1.7 billion US for its defence during the next year, and indeed is actually seeking to have a new agreement with India for the supply of new armament, state-of-the-art armaments. I think that there are several factors that are coming into play here. Firstly, there is the fact that Pashinyan himself still hasn't persuaded his own population and his own diaspora of the need for peace. I've always been of the view very much that Pashinyan himself does understand the need for peace, and that's why we've actually got very close to it at the moment. But it still remains that Armenia is very much prevaricating at the current time. There's the Miatsum clauses in the preamble to the Armenian constitution, which make claims on Azerbaijani territory, and those haven't been taken out yet. The peace deal cannot proceed until those are removed. Pashinyan himself seems very unwilling to take that major step, to maybe go to a referendum so that they can be removed from the Armenian constitution, because he knows it won't sit well with the vast majority of his population who are either war veterans or have memories of the war or have been brainwashed in some way or other, and also with the diaspora as well, particularly in France, the United States, who really supported the occupation of Azerbaijani territories for the 30 years. So I think that is really the reason why he's continuing to actually spend this extraordinary amount of money, given the state of the Armenian economy, on the state-of-the-art armaments. There's also the fact that Armenia these days is really kind of standing on its own feet. Its historic supporter, of course, was Russia. Pashinyan started to walk away from Russia, walk sort of towards the EU as well, and that was something very significant as well. But also Russia is very much distracted, and understandably so, with its conflict in Ukraine. And it seems to have kind of given up with Armenia, albeit Armenia was invited to BRICS Plus last week. And then there's also the other main supporter for Armenia historically was also Iran as well. But of course that's very much distracted these days with the conflict with Israel. So I think that Pashinyan in many ways is trying to show himself to be a strong leader to the part of the population that still does not want a peace deal to be struck with Azerbaijan. And that is why he's doing it. He's really hanging on to his own political life at this moment in time. And also my thoughts are that in many ways he does prevaricate deliberately for his own political future, but I think there's still something in the back of the Armenian psychology that one day maybe Russia will come back and support Armenia again. Certainly the trade connections between Armenia and Russia still remain very strong. In fact, they're going up at the moment, and it's being proved at the moment that Armenia is actually being a conduit for illegal resources to actually go to Russia at the moment and facilitate trade. And I think that maybe he has somewhere in the back of his mind, it's very befuddled. He's not, as we all know, he's not really a professional politician. He's a journalist like you and me, historically. And I think that in many ways he possibly might be hoping that one day Russia may come back on his side again, and he won't ever need to actually finalise this peace deal. But certainly with this level of spending taking place and the pledges that are taking place and the agreement with India that's taking place at the moment, I don't see a man who's going to be amending the Armenian constitution and signing a peace deal either before or during COP29. No, it's not going to happen.
Interesting, thank you so much. Now, I would like to touch upon the idea of other thing, as you mentioned, about BRICS Plus Summit that occurred in the 24th, from 22nd until the 24th October in Kazan, Russia. There is a certain anticipation from analysts, most certainly, that the US dollar can be weakened. And of course, BRICS is trying to establish a new currency, as it was actually, let's say, formally introduced by Vladimir Putin during the summit. Considering this recent BRICS summit and bloc steps toward de-dollarization, do you think such efforts might influence the dollar's value in the near term? Can you expect that? And certainly, we have US elections upcoming. Mm-hmm. Can it actually affect the dollar's current position?
I don't think that's the main objective of BRICS Plus. I think that it can have an effect on the value of the dollar going forward. I also think that the outcome of the American election is more likely to have a direct influence on the value of the US dollar around the world. But I do think BRICS Plus is very, very important, because we are seeing a situation here where President Putin of Russia is really taking advantage of the fact that the West does not have a united stance in relation to the ongoing conflict with Ukraine. And because certain parts of Eastern Europe, certain parts of the former Soviet bloc as well, they are still continuing either to sit on the fence or indeed in some ways to tacitly support Russia at the moment. A case in point being, of course, Armenia itself. You know, the fact is that we are actually seeing an opportunity for President Putin to actually bring together many of the nations that have been, to a certain extent, castigated because of their relationship either to him or for another reason. So in BRICS, the major proponent of the whole thing is Russia. That's why it was hosted in Kazan. Iran is part of it as well. We've got China as part of it. And it looks like it's going to expand out maybe to 30 more different nations. And
sorry for interrupting,
yeah, sure.
Considering like the about 45% of the GDP is actually included inside of the BRICS summit countries, because all the countries have lots of resources, yes, and etc. Like, you know, can it actually affect that whole situation?
Yeah, I think ultimately it can. There is an enormous amount of resources who are actually encompassed amongst the BRICS nations at the moment. And a lot of the resources that we're talking about, they're the ones that are needed for new technologies, particularly in relation to electric vehicles and so forth. You know, we've got a lot of rare minerals, rare soils and things are actually incorporated amongst these countries. So I think the BRICS organization is and can be a lot stronger, and it will be also it's an alternative against the American-run entities, NATO, the UN and so forth, and also against the EU as well. I think people are feeling very jaded with all these international organisations, mostly founded after World War II, and they are looking for something new. And with the thing about the BRICS is the fact that it actually brings all these nations together, whether they're regarded as pariah states like Iran and Russia or not. So I think that ultimately it can be an alternative for the future and can be a very strong alternative.
Interesting. Now I would like to drift a little bit to our region. Now, as we all know, that the Georgian parliamentary elections recently happened on Sunday, and now as for the result, the current Georgian Dream Party have won a landslide victory, like 54% during the elections, and of course lots of ideas. Most certainly it had a huge, let's say, reaction from the West side, most certainly, because they weren't actually expecting that kind of a result at the end of the day. And there was an interesting thing that happened. OSCE observation mission said that no violations were detected during the parliamentary elections in Georgia. But, however, this report was sent to the EU, although even though it was sent to the EU, Georgia Borrell and the entire Brussels side, including Charles Michel, did not take meaningful approach to this issue, and they stated that the elections were fake and it was deteriorated by the Georgian Dream party. So considering that the same system, like the OSCE observation mission was in US elections, European parliamentary elections, and etc., how can the same system can be applied in Europe and US that you cannot actually see that kind of statement, although they come and say it's fake and it's deteriorated, even though they have a certificate, like a certificated report that says there wasn't any violations in the parliamentary elections. I would like to ask that question.
No, it's a very interesting and extremely timely question, because I think we're actually seeing, first of all, the OSCE observation mission that included PACE, it included EU observers as well, NATO observers. It was a very strong international number of observers who were participating in this. And as you rightly say, there were no major violations that were found. In fact, in Georgia itself, they've instigated a new and quite technologically advanced electronic method of voting, which we don't even have in the UK at the moment. So I think...
Which is a technology that can be disrupted, they can be interrupted intervened by the Georgian Dream or anyone.
It could be interrupted by anybody. But look, we've had it in America with the hanging chads in the presidential election around 20 years ago. All kinds of things can be open to manipulation. But the fact is...
I'm talking about the electronic version.
Yes, the electronic version also can be manipulated, of course, one way or the other. All voting systems can be open to violation. But the fact is that the observers were there. They were in all the different provinces of Georgia itself, and they've come away with the impression, yes, it wasn't perfect, but we've got to remember this is a former Soviet republic that's still got some of its lands occupied at the moment. We've got the situation in Abkhazia, South Ossetia, which has gone on for a very, very long time. And it's quite difficult to have maybe the Western model of democracy immediately implanted into such a situation. But I do feel that we're seeing a lot of double standards demonstrated here, because the fact is that they've said that there was a level playing field, that I believe there were 18 different parties who were participating in this election. And I think that, in many ways, they're trying to make it too black and white. They're using Georgia as a way to get at Putin again, President Putin again, because they're saying that Georgian Dream is a Russian puppet. Well, Georgian Dream have quite openly said that they are not seeking to walk away from Georgia's EU aspirations. That's not part of the manifesto. They're certainly not going to reopen diplomatic relations with Russia, because Russia, for them, is a country that's invaded some of their territory and has got troops on their soil. So I think that we are seeing some double standards going on here. Every election has its problems. I think many ways, we've seen here that a quite extraordinary proportion of people in the rural regions voted for Georgian Dream. But these are the people who maybe are not so educated, maybe they don't know everything that's going on, maybe they don't understand the fullness of the manifestos for each of the parties. I think there's more to be done in the way of education of the people than there is actually to be changing the voting system in itself. And Georgian Dream is not blatantly a Russian puppet. Sure, some of the laws that they've tried to introduce over the last few months, they have mirrored some of those that we find in Russia. But on the other hand, they still stand on their own feet. So I think we're seeing a great deal of double standards being implemented here.
Thank you so much. Now, as we have 6 days remaining for the US elections, I would like to ask your opinion on that as well, as we have changed of course, the topic quite fast. But US elections, of course, stands at the important, pivotal center point of the world's politics and economics, and it's just we can't count on it for the 4 days. But I would like to ask your opinion on current US elections as it stands out is going on a tight race. Normally we can actually see, we were actually able to see a certain candidate having a upper hand until the end of end of the president election starting, let's say, president elections campaign, let's say. But considering this tight race, we have seen lots of things happening in the U.S., of course, and most certainly U.S. Politics, in a way, Democrats and Republicans have lots of different aspects in terms of conducting politics in the world. Now, I would like to ask your opinion. Considering Armenian lobbies in U.S., we have seen in the last 4 years, let's say, we have seen lots of pro-Armenian politicians, U.S. politicians, being at the Congress, stating lots of anti-Azerbaijani campaigns, or making statements about Azerbaijan, etc. First of all, my question I would like to break down for make it easier. First, which candidate do you think that will be winning at the end of the campaign? What's your prediction? And second, how this candidate can have an impact on this certain Armenian lobby activity?
It's the $64,000 question at the moment. There is literally a cigarette paper between the two candidates. I saw a Gallup poll this morning. It was 47-48. 48 was to Kamala Harris. It's too close to call at the moment. There's a margin of error with every poll that's taking place, and some polls indeed are being conducted by media which are known to have one bias one way or the other. I am very much of the view that on the day Trump is going to win, because he does appeal to a very large number of Americans who actually will come out and vote on the day itself. The fact is that Kamala Harris, who's also doing extremely well, considering that the level that she's come in at as vice president, and she then becomes the candidate almost by default because Joe Biden dropping out. She's done extraordinarily well, but you can't deny it. It's going to be the Hispanics, it's going to be the people from different ethnicities who are actually going to be her natural supporters. And unfortunately, these are the people who often either aren't registered to vote or literally just won't come out and vote on the day. So I do feel that probably it's going to be President Trump that actually gets back into the White House again. Now, the question is, I think we were talking about the Armenian lobby. Now, certainly Kamala Harris has been courted by the Armenian lobby, talking about so-called genocides and so forth, and actually trying to get her to understand their perspective, because of course they are also they are a minority ethnicity in the United States, albeit very strong, very influential, very powerful, and very wealthy as well. So we have that situation. If she did get in, it's not going to be good for Azerbaijan. I think that she will have swallowed the Armenian pill completely. But also, I feel that Trump is not going to be very much better, but coming at it from a different approach, because Trump is very protectionist of American interests specifically, and that involves not getting involved with any overseas conflicts.
Yes,
so he does not want to spend any money, any resources, and any time, because he has a very low boredom threshold himself, to actually get involved with the situation any further. So he's going to step back from that. We also know that in many ways he has been assisted in some ways by President Putin over the years. President Putin, and certainly Russia, as we all know, was the historic supporter of Armenia. There's a problem at the moment, but nonetheless, old memories do not die. And then there's also the fact that he's a Republican, he appeals to the religious rights. Yes. And his understanding of the world and some of the statements he's also made over the years indicate that he does not understand the vagaries of the Karabakh conflict. He does not understand its territorial basis. And he wants to court the wealthy religious rights. And certainly, Armenia always paints it out to be some kind of ages-long religious conflict, Islam against Christianity. It's a very simplistic way of understanding it. That's why Trump and his supporters understand it that way. So whoever gets into the White House, it's not going to be good for Azerbaijan, I feel. We're not going to end up with a pro-Azerbaijani president in the White House. Plus, there's the fact that Azerbaijan and Turkey are close together. There's definitely a problem between the White House and Turkey, or Turkey. So that also is not going to help Azerbaijan either. So that's my view on the matter.
Very, very interesting opinions, Mr. Neil. Thank you so much for joining us. I think we had a very insightful interview.
Well, Choksagol, thank you very much for inviting me to appear on AzerNews today.
Daimez. And that's it for today, dear AzerNews viewers. It was me, Akbar Norris, joining you, and our guest, political scientist and journalist, Neil Watson. Thank you for watching. Don't forget to like, subscribe, and comment.